Charger, Ashto, Tarasata, Shi, Marty's Divine Grace, as High Channel around in the background of the Summer Shil Prabhupada, the Key, ISKCON, BBD Founder Charya, Save the Whole World, Shil Prabhupada, the Key, Jain, Little Vishnu, Vishnu Pada, Paramahangsa, Parivra Jaka Charger, Ashto, Tarasata, Shi, Marty's Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta, Saraswati, Thakur Maharaj, Key, Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki, Nama Charger Sarai Rastakuri Ki, Brahmsaka Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadad Hara Sri Sadhgora Bhaktivinoda Ki, Sri Radha Krishna Gopanath Shamakund Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Braj Bhumi Shavindama Dama Ki, Navadip Mayapur Dama Ki, Purusham Chatra Jaganapuri Dama Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki, Jai Nitai Go Premanandi, all glories to the Assembled Glories, all glories to the Assembled Glories, all glories to the Assembled Glories, all glories, Lord Sri Guru and Sri Guru, all glories to Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Okay, so I can't read that. Unfortunately, I'm not very educated and I can't read French. Oh. It's okay, I've got it here.
I'll put it back.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, where are we? Shri Shukru Vacha Jono Vasunam Pravaro Jono Vasunam Pravaro Jono Vasunam Pravaro Daraya. Oh, we don't have a verse border. Okay.
It's good for the
because
brain.
usually we read Lilamrita in the summer.
Oh, I was just told I could do Bhagavatam and this is the verse I was given, so that's what I'm doing.
We can use our brain.
Yeah, that'd be good. It's always a good thing. Actually, there's some scientific belief that if you keep your brain active and use your brain, you'll stave off dementia. So, good to use the brain. That's why calculators, and like when I went to school, we didn't have calculators. Only when I got to, I think, the 10th grade or 11th grade, we were actually allowed to use calculators. But now, you ask someone to do some maths in their brain, they can't do it. Oh, where's my calculator? Pull out the phone and do it on the phone. Okay, Dharaya, Bharyaya, Saha, Dharaya, Bharyaya, Saha, Dharaya, Bharyaya, Saha, Drono vasunam pravaro Daraya Baryaya Saha Karishamana Adeshan Karishamana Adeshan Karishamana Adeshan Brahmanas Tam Uvacha Ha Brahmanas Tam Uvacha Ha Brahmanas Tam Uvacha Ha Karishamana Adeshan Brahmanas Tam Uvacha Ha Shisuka Uvacha Drono Vasunam Pravaro Dadaya Varyaya Saha Karishamana Adeshan Brahmanastam Uvachaha Shisuka Uvacha Drono Vasunam Pravaro Dadaya Varyaya Saha Karishamana Adeshan Brahmanastam Uvachaha Shisukuru Vacha Drono Vasunam Pravaro Daraya Varyaya Saha Karishamana Adeshan Brahmanastam Uvachaha. Can anyone remember it? There's actually an interesting story Prabhupada tells about how if one's pure, they develop perfect memory. And so there was a court case where someone was protesting that someone was verbally abusive to them. And so it was like, it's like in court, it's one worse person against another. So this man was saying, oh, he said da-da-da, and the other person saying, no, I didn't. So they called a Brahmana who was there and he heard. And he repeated verbatim what that person had said. He said, I don't know what it means, but he repeated it verbatim. It was all these swear words and things like that because he'd never heard it before. And the point that Prabhupada was making was that when one lives a pure life, then you develop this shrutidar. It means you hear something once and you can repeat it. And this is, like previously, all the Brahmanas were shrutidar because they didn't need books. But because of the effects of Kali Yuga, we need books. Because we've become very, our intelligence has become very contaminated.
So if you read a book now, you're very advanced.
Huh?
If you read a book nowadays, you're very advanced.
Oh yeah. There's like these computers they're actually a curse. They're useful, I mean, because or phones and stuff, it means you can have all the Prabhupada's books in your hand. It's great, but we tend to get a little bit distracted by it. Shri Sukuru Vacha, Shri Sukadev Goswami said, Drona, by the name Drona, Vasunam, of the 8 Vasus, a type of demigod. So Drona was one of the Vasus. Do we know someone else who was one of the Vasus? Bhishma, yeah, Jal. He was Jal Vasu. He was cursed because he stole a cow from Vishishta, and so he was cursed to take birth as Bhishma Dev. But it's interesting because like when Ganga was having, when what was his name? I fell in love with Ganga. I can't remember the king's name. Bhishma's father, Shantanu. Yeah, and so he married Ganga and he impregnated her. And every time she got pregnant, she would take the child and throw the child in the Ganges. And because one of the conditions, she said, "Okay, I'll marry you, but you never question anything I do. You never chastise me." And so he agreed to that. And then so one child after the next, she'd thrown into the Ganges. And finally, he said, "Woman, what are you doing? He said, this is horrible. You're killing children." And then so she left him, and she took the child with him. And when the child became 15, I think it was. Then she brought the child and gave it back to him, and he arranged for the martial education of this child from Parashuram, and that was Bhishma Dev. So, yeah. Pravara, who was the best?
Who was the best?
So he's Vasunam Pravaro, he's the best of the Vasus. Yeah? Dharaya, with Dhara. Bharyaya, his wife. Saha, with Karishyamana, just to execute. Adeshan, the orders. Brahmana, of Lord Brahma. Tam, unto him. Uvacha, said. Ha, in the past. Translation. Shukadev Goswami said. Let me say it once and then you can repeat, if that's okay with you. To follow the orders of Lord Brahma, Drona, the best of the Vasus, along with his wife Dhara, spoke to Lord Brahma in this way. Responsively, please. Shukadev Goswami said. To follow the orders of Lord Brahma. Drona, the best of the Vasus, along with his wife Dhara, spoke to Lord Brahma in this way. Purport, Srila Prabhupada. As it is stated in the Brahma Samhita 537, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Vistaviya Eva Nijarupa Taya Kalavi Galoka Eva Nivishat Yakilatma Bhuto Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. And that's the verse which is explaining how, because it doesn't have a translation here, how Krishna expands himself in so many different ways. Also Radha is there. When Krishna descends anywhere, he is accompanied by his own associates. These associates are not ordinary living beings. Krishna's pastimes are eternal, and when he descends, he comes with his associates. Therefore, Nanda and Mother Yasoda are the eternal father and mother of Krishna. So it's explained, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains in the Brahma Samhita how just as Krishna expands himself in so many Vishnu forms to do the various activities, also we see that Radha expands herself in so many different ways. And the Sakhis, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains these are all expansions of Krishna's Chit Shakti, or his internal potency. So even though they are individual living entities, they're all expansions of the same energy. This means that whenever Krishna descends, Nanda and Yasoda, as well as Vasudeva and Devaki, also descend as the Lord's father and mother. Their personalities are expansions of Krishna's personal body. They are not ordinary living beings. Maharaj Parikshit knew this, but he was curious to know from Shukadev Goswami whether it is possible for an ordinary human being to come to this stage by sadhana siddhi. There are two kinds of perfection, Nitya Siddha and Sadhana Siddha. A Nitya Siddha is one who is eternally Krishna's associate, an expansion of Krishna's personal body, whereas a Sadhana Siddha is an ordinary human being who, by executing pious activities and following regular principles of devotional service, also comes to that stage. Thus, the purpose of Maharaj Parikshit's inquiry was to determine whether an ordinary being can attain the position of Mother Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj. Sukadeva Goswami answers this question as follows, which is in the next verse. And we'll see that in the next verse, Prabhupada is explaining that one can come to that perfection of being Krishna's mother and father, or attain that same rasa, or same feeling. Sorry, I realised the microphone was there. But one cannot become Yasoda, or Nanda, or Vasudeva, or Devaki. Those positions are eternally occupied by the same personalities. So this is a really interesting and very, well, I think it's actually beyond my capacity to understand, but it's a very interesting purport. And it's explaining the difference between Nitya Siddha and Sadhana Siddha, or those who are eternally perfected and those who are achieve perfection. There's different types of perfection. Obviously, there's Nitya Siddha, there's Sadhana Siddha, there's Kripa Siddha. So a Nitya Siddha means one who's eternally perfected. But there's different statements in the scriptures that give us different understandings of this. Just like we said, there's Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhakona Shavana, this Chitta Kadarodaya. This eternal perfection of love of Godhead is there in the heart. We're always, this is the nature of the jiva, is to love Krishna. But because of this desire to be separate from Krishna, this desire to be the controller, to be the enjoyer, we're here. There's an interesting letter which Prabhupada wrote to a devotee called Jananivas. Not the Jananivas we all know. There was a devotee living in Canada called Jananivas who died in a car crash. And Prabhupada wrote him a letter and he explained, it's just like, he says, just like, sometimes he said the living entity is always Krishna conscious. It's just like, but sometimes they're covered. And he said, it's just like the moon. From our perspective, the moon sometimes appears to be waxing and waning. But what's the actual condition of the moon? It's always full. But just from our conditioned perspective, we don't see that down here. So in the same way, the jiva appears to be covered from our conditioned perspective, but actually the jiva is always Krishna conscious in its natural state. So, this is one way that Prabhupada answered this idea of the jivas, the fall of the jivas, and some are of the view that we were never in Vaikuntha. But Prabhupada seemed to have a different perspective on it, and he explained it in other ways. Going back home, back to Godhead. So just that phrase indicates we're going back where we came from. And he would use that phrase repeatedly. Things like that. And then I remember having this conversation with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj one time in Sydney, and just trying to understand this statement from this letter from Prabhupada more. And he said, he explained to me, he took his chara and he covered his hand over. He said, it's just like you can't see my hand, but it's still there. And so it's just like the Maya covers it over like that. And this is the nature of Maya, how the living entity becomes so covered. Prabhupada, or the scriptures describe there's two potencies of Maya. There's the Prapekatmika Shakti and the Avaranatmika Shakti. So the one of the Shaktis, when the living entity desires to be the controller, desires to be the enjoyer, desires to be separate from Krishna, not to accept Krishna's supremacy, then the living entity is thrown down into material nature and then covered over. And
could we put this down because I cannot see you?
Well, it's probably better to look at the back of the computer rather than look at me. But you can put that down if you want. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Prabhu. And it's just like Prabhupada at one point adopted this phrase called blooping. You've all heard that phrase? So, and he explained it one time. I'm sure he explained it more than one time, but I've read one time where he explained it. It's just like, have you ever had the experience where you take a stone and you drop it into mud? What's the sound it makes? Bloop. Right? And it's really interesting because if you drop a stone into water, what happens? There's ripples, yeah? And or you make a splash. And he said, like Prabhupada explained, the living entity, when they leave Krishna consciousness, they have this idea that I'm going to go back to the material world, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go back with a real splash. He said, actually, the sound is more like a bloop. You just drop into the mud, and when you drop the stone into the mud, there's no evidence there was ever a stone there. There's no ripple, there's nothing, just flat surface. And that's what happens with a living entity, is when they give up this position, or seemingly give up this position of Krishna consciousness. It's like we're in this material nature with no evidence that we're ever in the spiritual realm. And it's really amazing how the material nature just completely covers any recollection or any memory you had of being Krishna conscious. But that's our actual position. We're all actually Krishna conscious, but because of the effect of, giving up this attachment to Krishna, or trying to give up the attachment to Krishna, trying to be God, then we become covered over with material nature to such an extent that there's no evidence that you are connected with Krishna. And just speak to anyone who's not a devotee, and you'll see no evidence whatsoever. You try to tell them, oh, you were originally Krishna conscious, you're a devotee, you're a servant of God. What is this God? They'll question even the existence of God, let alone their own relationship with God. And you'll see, just like I was mentioning yesterday about that scientist, even though you can present the evidence to them, just like we're reading from the Adi Leela chapter 2 yesterday, and Lord Brahma, he gives these three arguments on how Krishna is Narayan, and very, very scientific arguments, and even we can present the most scientific arguments to a materialist, and they can't accept that Krishna is God. They can't accept that we all come from God. They can't accept that God's the creator. Just can't accept any of these things, all by chance. That's their verdict. It's all by chance. And so this is the nature of the Lord's material energy, that it's so powerful it just completely covers over the living entity. Yet, if one comes to the practice of Krishna consciousness, one can actually overcome the effect of the Lord's material energy. And I just wanted to read something for you from the Bhakti Rasa Vida Sindhu. It's really interesting. I was just going over it this morning. It talks about, as we know in devotional service, there's three main elements of our practice. There's sadhana bhakti, there's bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, and as we know, sadhana bhakti has two elements, meaning vaidhi and raganuga. Vaidhi means that which is strictly according to rules and regulations. Raganuga means that when you actually have a taste, when you have this, your impetus is just like, okay, we attend Mangalarti because the Guru's told us, or Prabhupada's told us, you attend Mangalarti and it's good for you, you chant japa, you follow regular principles. We do this because we're asked to do it, because we're told this is good for us. But when you actually get to the point where you have some inspiration or impetus, I want to do these things because I like it, I find it attractive, this is Raganuga. And then this develops further into Bhava. Now, this is from the Eastern Ocean, the third wave. Eastern Ocean is the first section. The Eastern Ocean discusses Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, and Bhava Bhakti. And last there's a short section on Prema Bhakti as well. Now, I'm not claiming to know all these things very well, but just it's interesting. That part of Bhakti is called Bhava, whose essence is Samvit and Hladini Shakti, which is one ray of the sun of Prema. So it's actually an element of Prema, and it says which will soon rise in the heart. So if one comes to the point of Bhava, Prema is not very far away. But Bhava is very, very elevated. And we see great souls like Bharat Maharaj. He was experiencing Bhava, and it's saying here how Prema softens the heart with desire to meet, serve, and exchange loving pastimes with the Lord, loving relationship with the Lord. Then I'm not going to read all of these things because Jiva Goswami's purport is phenomenal. The preliminary state of Prema is called Bhava, and there are a few sattvika bhavas which manifest when a person is experiencing Bhava, such as tears in the eyes, hair standing on end. You read different stories of how various devotees have manifested, the tears and horripilations, things like that. This is a manifestation of Bhava. And this is explaining how it's a ray of Prema, because when one experiences Prema, these things are just erupting all the time. And it's uncontrollable sometimes. Bhava appears in a very fortunate person in two ways. And this is why I want to read this, because this is really important for us. By absorption in sadhana, or by the mercy of Krishna or his devotee. And Rupa Goswami goes on to explain, its appearance by sadhana is normal, its appearance by mercy is rare. So as I was reading this morning, I thought this is why we find our acharyas give such emphasis on sadhana. rising early, attending Mangalarti, following regular principles, chanting japa, hearing shastra, because this is our pathway to purification. Because like we can't expect that we're going to achieve bhava or advancement by the mercy of devotees. Just, and there are many examples of personalities who have achieved bhava by the mercy of Krishna or his devotees. Just like we see with Sukadeva Goswami. He was in the womb a very, very advanced devotee. This is an example of mercy. You look at the hunter, Mragari the hunter, that Narad Muni blessed. This is another example of someone who's achieved bhava by mercy, by the mercy of Narad Muni. And usually this mercy can come by seeing the Lord, by hearing the words of the Lord. And there's another way, I can't remember what it was, but there's a few different ways one achieves bhava. It says here, bhava arising from sadhana has two types, arising from vaidhi sadhana and arising from brahmanuga sadhana. Absorption in sadhana, nistha, produces ruchi, then shakti, then rati or bhava for the Lord. So rati, bhava, the same thing. So by becoming absorbed in sadhana, this means nistha. Nistha means steadiness. When we become steady in our practice of devotional service. And you see, like there are a number of advanced devotees in ISKCON who we see are very, very steady in their sadhana. One example that springs to my mind right now is His Holiness Shivaram Swami. He's very, very steady in his practice of devotion. I remember staying in his room one time in Vrindavan, and he has a low desk about this height. There's a glass on top of it. And underneath there, he's got his daily routine written. And it's by the minute, from this minute to this minute I do, the bathroom, he's only like 7 minutes or something in the bathroom. It was really, I couldn't believe how quick it was, But he's super clean. It's not like he doesn't clean himself properly. And then, from this time to this time he chants slokas, from this time to this time he chants his rounds. Every minute of the day is mapped out. And you see that he's very steady, and every day it's the same thing. Just like we see with someone like Srila Prabhupada. Every day you can read Hari Sori's diaries, or you can read, from Shruti Kirti Prabhu, you can see how he was so regulated in his daily activities. And this is nishtha, or great steadiness in devotional service. So, and as Rupa Goswami explains here, from absorption in sadhana, nishtha produces ruchi. You actually get a taste. Ruchi means you're starting to get a taste for the practice of bhakti, and from this taste you're experiencing great satisfaction. And then a shakti, and then rati or bhava. One starts to, the prem, the first ray of prem starts to manifest in the heart, and one starts to feel some, really solid emotions, for Krishna, and the attachment starts to become very deep. And I think if we thought about it a bit more, we could probably think of other devotees who are very, very steady in their practice. And I think there was one other verse I want to read here a bit further down. Maybe not. And then Rupa Goswami, a few verses later, he talks about how bhava can arise from Krishna's mercy. And it says, this mercy arises from the words of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, or it just appears in the heart. Sometimes there's examples of devotees where it's just appeared in the heart. Or just like you see someone like Dhruv Maharaj, he went to the forest, he performed his sadhana, but the Lord appeared, and he went into an ecstasy. He couldn't function. He just became paralyzed, and then the Lord touched him with his conch. And then he was able to offer the Lord. So just the presence of the Lord was able to inspire this bhava in the heart of Dhruva. So, I just wanted to share those few things about how one can manifest these various symptoms. Because here we see how it's talking about Dara and Drona becoming Yasoda and Nanda. And how they're actually exemplary devotees. And we see, especially in the pastimes of Krishna, how Yasoda Mai was, Nanda Maharaj obviously had very, very deep affection, but it seems that Yasoda's affection was much stronger than Nanda Maharaj's. And we see at various times how, like she'd just hear Krishna's ankle bells, or she'd hear his flute, and she's going to ecstatic symptoms, or sometimes she's going out to see if he's there, and she's going back to the house, she's backing out, she's agitated because of this ecstasy of Krishna, his pending presence. And there's many different wonderful pastimes where Yasoda Mai, out of fear of Krishna being harmed or something like that, she becomes overwhelmed. And there's even one interesting pastime, quite extraordinary, where Krishna's chastising the clear serpent, and how the cowherd boys, they relay back to the residents of Vrindavan how Krishna's in this lake in the Jamuna, and he's fighting with this huge serpent. And so all the residents, out of fear, not fear for themselves, but fear of Krishna being harmed by the serpent, because everyone in Vrindavan loves Krishna more than their own life. Krishna is the most important person to them. He's kind of their life breath, to use a phrase. And so they all go running with great haste to the Jamuna to see what's happening. And the Yasoda Mai, she sees Krishna entwined in the curls of Kaliya, and she just sees that Krishna's not moving. She's so affected by this that she actually gives up her life. And we see all the residents of Vrindavan, they faint on the bank of the Jamuna. And then Krishna, seeing this, he becomes moved by compassion, so he defeats Kaliya. Then he comes out of the water, he glances over all the residents of Vrindavan and brings them back to life. And when they see Krishna again, they also feel this sense of, oh, now my life has come back. It's really amazing, because if we read in the Krishna book, we'll see what happens. Let me just see, I have it here. When see, Brahma has instructed Drona and Dara to create progeny, and then they respond to him, because they just want to follow his instruction. They're very, very elevated personalities, and they say, "Dear Father, we are seeking your benediction. When we take birth again within the universe, may the Supreme Lord Krishna, in his most attractive feature of childhood, absorb our whole attention." So this is described by our acharyas, that this childhood feature of Krishna, this is the most attractive feature of Krishna, because in this, that's what we'll be singing in a little while, is Damadarastaka, and it mentions there in the Damadarastaka how the childhood pastimes of Krishna are the most attractive, and it's kind of interesting because Krishna likes this feature of being a child, because for him there's no responsibility, he can just play and have fun. Whereas the parents, you see, in the pastimes of Nanda, Yasoda, and all the other residents of Vraja, there's so much anxiety that Krishna's being attacked by this. Like they moved from Gokula to Braj to get away from the demons, because Upananda was saying, there's constant harassment by all these different inauspicious living entities. This one's come, that one's come. So then they moved to Braj to get away from this. But then in Braj, the same thing happens. There's just one demon after the next. And we see in the Bhagavatam, it's only the more prominent demons are mentioned. Actually, every day, the acharyas describe every day there's something going on. Because Krishna wants to engage in pastimes with his friends, and his friends just love it when they see, Krishna, he picks up the Nukasura, Krishna Balaram, they pick up the Nukasura and their friends, they whirl them around, and they throw them up into the tal trees, and then the tal trees break and they all fall down, so the kids can pick up all the tal fruit and they can have, a great time. And for them, as children, this is very, it's like the best childhood play. And they just love every minute of it. But for the elders, they're in so much anxiety because, Krishna's being harassed by this demon, being harassed by that demon. But this is Krishna's way of deepening the affection that his devotees feel for him. And there's that verse, Parittaraya saranam vinischaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge. Prabhupada explains this. Of course, we understand the translation that's there in the Gita, where to live the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. But Srila Prabhupada, in his comments in classes, etc., on this verse, he actually explains that this is not the real reason Krishna comes, because the devotees, they're already saved. They don't, because why? They're always absorbed in Krishna. Just like we know that verse from Kunti, where Vipada Shantatasha Bhavado Dashanam Apunam Bhavadashanam. She said, let the calamities come again and again and again. Because when I'm not advising you to pray like this, because I certainly wouldn't pray like this. Let the calamities come again and again, because when the calamities come, I think of you. And when I think of you, I no longer fear repeated birth and death. So devotees are already saved because they're constantly absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. They see everything that happens to them as an impetus to think of Krishna. This is what Kunti is doing, the Pandavas. Pandavas are great devotees. All these calamities that happen, like we know that story of when what's his name? Duryodhana sent Devasa Muni to the Pandavas. His idea was that with knowing that Devasa has this angry nature, that they would likely do something because they had no facility. They would likely do something to upset Devasa, and Devasa would curse them. Therefore, they'd be finished, and that he'd be able to keep the kingdom. So he sent Devasa Muni, his 10,000 disciples, to meet the Pandavas just after they'd taken the meal, because he understood that Draupadi has this mystic pot where as long as she hasn't eaten, she can feed as many people as she wants. So then Devasa Muni, they go there just after Draupadi's finished the meal with his 10,000 disciples, and Yudhisthira says, yes, my dear Devasa Raj, please go take your bath, and then we'll arrange for you to eat. Because he says, I've come here to have something to eat. And it's quite normal that when a sadhu comes, you'll offer them a seat, you'll offer them water, and you'll offer them something to eat. Quite normal. And so they were all in anxiety, thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And then, so what happens, and Draupadi is in great anxiety because she realizes, I've just eaten, I can't feed anyone else out of this pot. And immediately, she calls out to Krishna. Immediately she calls out to Krishna, and Krishna comes. And Krishna's nature is that he just wants to protect his devotees. So he comes there and he asks Draupadi, do you have anything left? And she says, no, there's nothing. She said, look in the pot, look again. And so she looks in the pot. This is a well-known story. He looks in the pot, and there's just one piece of sak left in the pot. He says, quickly, give it to me. And she takes it, and immediately he's satisfied. And then, as we know, Devasa Muni and all his disciples, they feel fully satisfied, and so they just quietly go away because they can't eat anything. And we see how Krishna always protects his devotees. So, but he doesn't have to descend to do that, because the devotees are always absorbed in thought of Krishna. And I often have this conversation with my wife about this, how we see that Krishna's always there. He's taking care of us in every step of our lives. And we often share, her and I share our experiences of how Krishna is taking care of us. Just like coming here from Germany, I came by train, and because I'm teaching in London, then teaching twice in America, I've got some extra paraphernalia and bits and pieces with me, which means I've got too many bags. And so the experience I had was coming from Germany on the train. I was thinking, oh my gosh, when I get to Paris, none of the metros have got elevators or escalators in them, so you have to carry all these bags up and down the stairs. And so, I was in Paris East. I don't know how to say it in French, but I was in the East Paris station, and I got this big suitcase and two small ones, and so I'm carrying them down. I took the small ones down the stairs, put them down. I turned around to go back up and get the big one, and there's some gentleman just carrying the thing down the stairs for me. And then I got on the train and I got to Austerlitz, and the same thing happened. And it just dawned on me, Krishna's taking care. If we just try to our best endeavor to serve Krishna, we have no fear. Krishna will take care. And he says this to Arjuna at the end of the Gita. He says, Ma Suchaha. Don't fear. I'll always protect you. I'll deliver you from whatever calamity you face in this world. I'll deliver you. And it doesn't necessarily mean he'll save our bodies. It doesn't necessarily mean he'll carry our suitcases. We shouldn't think that. We shouldn't expect that. But it means that we'll always be able to absorb ourselves in thought of Krishna. This is how Krishna protects us. By this constant absorption in thought of him. And then it says, Prithanaya saranam vinaschayata duskritam, that he will annihilate the miscreants. So also we see that Krishna doesn't necessarily need, sometimes he comes down to annihilate miscreants like Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu. Why? Because he wants to enjoy this rasa, this chivalrous rasa, this killing people and fighting and things like that. Because all the 12 different relationships, they come from Krishna. And so he engages in these different relationships. So sometimes he likes to engage in fighting with the demons. And we see, when Krishna fights, boy, does he fight. Fights like no one else can fight. And then when he's tired of it, just like that. We see, like with Hiranyaksha, he just clipped him behind the ear, just gentle behind the ear, and he was dead. Or Hiranyakashipu, with his fingernails, he tore this demon apart and just ripped out his intestines and was using them as a garland and all, drinking his blood and things. It's like incredible the way he fights. But he doesn't need to do that. Because we see, I was talking about this I think in Switzerland the other day. It's like, if Krishna wants to wipe out demons, all he has to do is have the material nature move the floor of the ocean a few meters. And there's a tsunami, goes halfway across the world and wipes out millions of demons. It's incredible. The power of Krishna is incredible. Just like you see with Pompeii. And there was that eruption in Vesuvius, and the whole city was just obliterated, gone, in moments. No one left. Or the Balakurukshetra. All these atheistic people were annihilated in 18 days. Millions upon millions of atheists were annihilated in a very, very short time. So the real reason Krishna appears here is to engage in loving exchanges with his devotees. And this is what we see here in this pastime. And Prabhupada's making this point in the Krishna book. May the Supreme Lord Krishna, in his most attractive feature of childhood, absorb our whole attention. Because Drona and Dara, they're realizing this is the most attractive feature of Krishna, and we want to become completely absorbed by this. So Krishna, in order to fulfill this desire, is manifesting these wonderful childhood pastimes. If you read the childhood pastimes in the Krishna book, they're so attractive. They're such beautiful pastimes, and they completely captivate our attention. And the more we become purified, the more our hearts become pure, the more captivating we'll find them. May our dealings with him be so powerful that simply by hearing of these childhood activities of his, anyone will very easily cross over the nescience of birth and death. This is the prayer that Drona and Dara are offering to Lord Brahma, and Brahma fulfills that. And we find that anyone who listens to these childhood pastimes without committing offense, with a degree of faith, then they'll easily cross over this ocean of nescience. And this is the nature of the pastimes, especially the childhood pastimes of the Lord, is they're so attractive that anyone who hears them can overcome this cycle of birth and death, and just by this repeated hearing. Okay, any questions or comments? Yes, Marcia.
Thank you, Prabhu. You were speaking about the stage of Nishta, and you gave the example of Shivaram Swami.
A little louder.
You were speaking about the Nishta stage.
Nishta stage of Bhakti.
Nishta, okay.
And you were giving the example of Shivaram Swami. And so I was wondering, for devotees, for example, have different services in the deity worship department. They have different schedule, and they cannot change their rounds at the proper time, so they have to chant later. So how can they become on that stage if it's always... Sure.
Well, your question reminds me of another person who I feel was also in Nishta stage, was Tamal Krishna Goswami. I mean, I'm not saying that was where he was. He definitely had achieved that stage. Maybe he was beyond that. Same with Shiva Maharaj. Maybe they're beyond that. I don't know. but I can see by their activities, very steady. So, deity worship offers you a wonderful opportunity to become steady, because everything's by the clock. You know, everything has to be done. And you'll see some pujaris are just like super steady. Day in, day out, same thing, they're doing the same thing. And it's not like they're, you know, like you'll see with some pujaris, they're doing it just because they have to. They're doing it because this is the routine. But some devotees find great satisfaction. Just like yesterday, I had the last session of a 9-week session I've been doing for devotees in Philadelphia online. And on that session, I have a 6-minute video when we start the session that I play of the installation of the Panchatattva. And one of the things I always appreciate when I watch that video is watching Janani Prabhu interacting with the deities. And you can see for him, it's not like it's some routine, there's a personal exchange there. And when we come to this point of being steady in our deity worship, you'll find that rather than just being a routine that's done out of necessity or out, I have to follow the rules because I've become advanced, it's done out of, there's a manifestation to some extent. I'm not saying it's prema or anything, but to some extent there's a manifestation of love there. And this is why we do it. We do it because we have this attraction for the deities. And so, in terms of your sadhana, deity worship is part of Vaidhi Bhakti. It's a very important part of Vaidhi Bhakti because we're following many different rules. But also, getting back to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he told me one time that if because of deity worship you can't follow the regular practice of sadhana, you have to make it up somehow. Not make it up, speculate, but make up, make sure you do it. So have your Mangalarti at a different time, whatever. So I remember some years ago, I was in London for a while, and I was dressing every day while I was there. So what I would do is after breakfast, that was my japa time. I'd just be in the temple room, I wouldn't do anything else. Fortunately, there was no such thing as mobile phones in those days. And I would just chant my rounds without interruption. Or you'll see some devotees, they'll sit in Tulsi house and they'll chant their rounds in Tulsi house. But you have to make sure that you do it in try to be regular in your practice. Whatever it is you do, and because you're doing regular deity seva, you have to then map out your day in a different way. It's just like devotees who don't do deity seva, their day's mapped out, they come to Mangalarti, they chant their rounds, they attend the program like that. So they have a different program. So you just have to work out a program for you that fits you, and in that way become steady.
So you are saying that you're also doing Mangala Arati as well after?
Sorry?
Are you also doing Mangala Arati and all the morning programs in different time?
No, as much as you can. As much as you can, you should attend the regular program. See, this is a challenge, I think, with many pujaris. And if you want to become steady in devotional service, you need to become steady in sadhana. There's a really interesting lecture Prabhupada gave in Mayapur in 1972. And in there he talks about this Galagraha. And he said if we don't have a life, because what happened was he was giving class, he was talking about some topic, and then he saw some devotees got up to leave. He said, oh, where are they going? Some other business? Ugrakama. And Ugrakama is a very strong statement. It means horrible activities which are meant to destroy the world. So, a very strong statement. And then he went into this whole explanation of how we have to have this life of hearing and chanting. And he said, if we don't have this life of hearing and chanting, then Sri Vigraha will become Galagraha. So Sri Vigraha, he explains, means the worshipful deity, and Galagraha means like a stone around the neck. So if you have a stone around your neck, you fall in the water, you'll drown. And he said, and these big buildings, the Takobari means the home of the deity, will become simply a burden. It'll become a home for the pigeons and doves. So this is the essence of our movement. Really, it's the essence of our movement, is hearing and chanting. I'll see your hand for me, don't have to keep it up. The essence of our movement is hearing and chanting. So every devotee needs to take seriously the process of hearing and chanting, because if you don't take this seriously, you will not last the distance. So, work it out so that, You can attend Mangalarti. You know, if you need to prepare your outfit the day before, your jewelry the day before, fine, do that. Put it on a tray, cover it over the faucet, so it doesn't get dust on it. But do that. But maximize your sadhana. Don't use deity worship as an excuse not to do sadhana. And Prabhupada gave the same lecture again, practically the same, in Vrindavan, where he talked about this Galagraha. You know, if you're hearing and chanting, you'll understand who the deity is. And in Vrindavan, he said, and they will think that this old man has simply given us a burden, meaning himself. That it even gets to the point where you disrespect the Guru if you don't have this life of hearing and chanting, because you'll think the Guru is an ordinary man. Hearing and chanting is so important. And that's like those sections I read from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where Rupa Goswami explains that when you have steady sadhana, nishta, then these other stages, you know, of bhakti will develop. You know, don't count on the mercy. Don't count on that. It's like, you know, expecting you're going to get an honorary degree. Why? Why would you get an honorary degree? I mean, you know, when someone's like the king of a country, okay, they get honorary degrees. When you're an important person, you get an honorary degree. But we're just ordinary living entities. Why should we get an honorary degree? So don't expect that. Yeah. Prabhu, you had a question?
Just actually kind of a follow-on from her question is, basically in life, unexpected things happen.
Mm.
And that takes you out of your...
Yeah.
That was more or less...
Yeah, but obviously unexpected things happen, but as much as we can, try to be regulated. And you'll find the more you cultivate the mode of goodness, the less likely these unexpected things are. Because what's happening is the modes of nature are having their effect. And so if we're in passion, you'll find things are much less regulated. If we're in goodness, things are much more regulated. You look at Srila Prabhupada's lifestyle, it was so regulated. And even when he had to do things that were somewhat out of the ordinary in terms of his lifestyle, he still stuck to his regulation. He would travel halfway across the world and still rise at the same time every day. You know, so it's really important for us to come at least to the stage of nishta, that we cultivate regulation. And it can be very difficult, especially, I don't know what it's like for other devotees as they're getting older, but as you get older, you start to have struggles with sleeping and things like that, which can really mess up your regulation. But as best you can, try to be regulated. Prabhu.
Just to acquire some of the best deity worship you've seen as you've been moving around. I saw some very good deity worship in Krishna Bali.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you thought was really exceptional as you've been moving?
The dresses here are beautiful. The dresses here are amongst the best I've ever seen. Yeah. The Sesha is just such an amazing dress designer. And Radhe. They're both very, very artistic. The flower decorations in Vrindavan are stunning. Yeah. I mean, everywhere I go, I see amazing features in the worship. I don't think, I couldn't identify any single temple as being the best in ISKCON. I just couldn't do it. And I think it'd be doing a disservice, because my business is to encourage people, not to judge people. So, I mean, you know, sometimes I have to give feedback, and I'll be giving some feedback here. But you need to give feedback based on what you see. But also, I mean, gosh, you know, this is such a beautiful arrangement here. You know, look at the sun, you know, playing on Krishna's face. You know, it's just so nice. You don't get that in most temples. You know, and this is one of the things I really appreciate about this, and the curvature of Govinda Madhava. I mean, I haven't seen it. You know, like, I remember the last time I dressed him, I had to pin his turban onto his shirt so it didn't fall off his head, because he's leaning so much towards Radharani. And you know, I live in New Govardhan, Australia. I'm not sure if you know the pastime, but the deities there, Radha Govardhandari, they were meant to come here.
Yes.
But the temple president, Sababati, he went and stole them. He paid the Murtiwala more. And Shitala, when she went there, she realised something had happened, so then they recarved and they made these deities. And they're equally as beautiful, isn't it? Yeah? They're equally as beautiful. I mean, Radharani is so attractive. So everywhere I go, and Krishna, I mean, whatever form Krishna manifests himself in, Krishna's all attractive. And you'll find wherever I go, one of the things that you see is the way you say, aren't our deities the most attractive? How can you argue with that? Because that's Krishna, he's all attractive. And so these deities are extraordinarily beautiful. I mean, Balaram's just got the nicest face. Gosh, it's just such a dreamy expression. So, yeah, I don't think I could say that any temple is the best. I like elements of wherever I go. And I just feel blessed to have the darshan of these deities. And like when I go to London tomorrow, I'll feel the same thing. I'll be blessed to have the darshan of Radha-Mishra. And then I'll go up to Scotland and I'll have the darshan of 14,000 shellgraphs. So, wherever you go. Prabhu?
I have a question or something that you can comment on maybe. Because I spoke with different Prabhupada disciples about how the morning program was in Prabhupada's time. One example is Bhakti Vaibhava Swami. I don't know if the program was the same everywhere in Prabhupada's time, but many Prabhupada disciples said that one thing that was different was that the pujaris would chant the japa before changing the deities, in front of the deities with all the other devotees, at least for some time. And I think that's very good.
Yeah.
And I think it's natural that you chant your japa in front of the deities also. But that we don't do anymore, so what is your opinion on that? I was trained up to do like that.
Yeah, but when you say in front of the deities, that means the curtains are open?
Yes.
Because generally speaking, after Mangalati, the curtains close, and I think this has been a fairly common practice for a long time. That's what they do in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but I have heard, for example, Bhakti Vaibhava Swami said that, I don't remember where it was if it was Czech Republic or Germany.
Yeah.
But they kept the curtain open, so everybody would chant at least for an hour.
My understanding of the program that was set up by Prabhupada in Los Angeles in 1970-ish is basically what we're following now. Some slight variations, but then what he did is he asked devotees to come from different temples there to Los Angeles to see the blueprint he established and then take it back to their temples. There have been some minor modifications, but the basic concept of 4:30 Mangalati, then 5 till 7 japa, deity dressing, 7 o'clock darshan, Guru Puja, etc. My understanding is that's what Prabhupada set up in Los Angeles, because that's what they're still doing in Los Angeles now. And that was the program he wanted replicated all over ISKCON.
I think it's the program that I'm talking about, but the difference in many places that I have heard.
There's variations, but I think
the pujaris would chant some of their japa before changing the other devotees, and then they would change the deities during the class.
Yeah.
And for me, it seems to be a better program.
But that's not the program Prabhupada gave.
Everybody gets the chance to chant together.
Yeah, but it's not what Prabhupada gave.
I have heard that from different.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is what they established in Los Angeles. Prabhupada personally, he spent several months there. It was about 4 or 5 months he spent there with the idea to establish the blueprint for ISKCON, what he wanted done in ISKCON, the whole thing with the Tulsi Arati, everything. He went through and established the whole program. Even festivals, and the deity festival, he showed them how to follow deity festivals and stuff like that. That's what he wanted replicated in ISKCON. So, yeah, directly responding to the question, that's what Prabhupada established. What they did in other places, maybe that's what they did in other places, but I'm pretty sure that's not what Prabhupada established, because in Los Angeles in the 70s he did establish that as the program he wanted to follow throughout ISKCON. And there are some sort of slight variations that they do in different temples. And the other challenge you find is not everyone can dress the deities in an hour. It's just not practical for many devotees. I mean, I can't do it. I've been dressing deities for 30 years and I can't do it. Whereas other devotees I see, there was one devotee in Sydney who could dress the deities in 45 minutes. And they could put more on the deities in 45 minutes than I could take off them in an hour. You know, so it's a lot gets down to expertise as well, the number of pujaris you have, things like that. And some temples I visit, the pujaris, or not all the pujaris, but some of the pujaris will chant their japa before Mangalarti. You know, so different devotees do different things, but yeah, the program that
I have another little question.
Yeah, but the program Prabhupada established was Mangalarti 4:30 to 5 till 7 is japa and deity dressing at the same time, and then after that you have darshan, Guru Puja class. That was the program he followed in Los Angeles, and that's what he wanted temples to replicate.
I mean, I totally agree with that, I know that, but I just find it interesting that in other places they follow that program, except that they would chant some japa before they close the curtains, everybody together. And I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah.
To solve the problem that if you're pujari, that it's very difficult to maybe concentrate when you sit alone, or...
Yeah, I guess, I mean, each person's going to find various challenges and things that work for them, so it's just going to be an individual experience, really. Cool.
Just in response to that point from Prabhu here, I was reading in Shivaram Maharaj has written a book about chanting japa, and he says you should, if possible, close your eyes as much as possible to be concentrating on the...
Yeah, but many of us would fall asleep if we did that. I mean, the thing is, like, he's an advanced devotee, you know, he can do that, but I know me, if I close my eyes, even if I sit down these days, I find it very challenging, so I walk. I find that works for me. So, and if you walk with your eyes closed, you're going to bang into things. So I think it's an individual experience, you know, and each person needs to find what's going to work for them to cultivate bhakti. That's really what we have to do, is what works for you.
Also, again, in response to that, I think it is a good idea to somehow bring an image of Krishna.
If that's what works for you. Yeah. I find it distracting, especially images of deities, because we're looking at all the things that need to be adjusted.
Well, I mean, in your mind.
Yeah. There's the lecture Prabhupada gave in Melbourne in 1974. It was on Bhagavad Gita 7.1. And he made the point, this tashshinu, just here. He said, when you're chanting your japa, just here. So this obviously is the beginning stage of devotional. So Shiva Maharaj did a presentation to the GBC on all the different evolving sort of stages of chanting. But at least in the beginning stage, just here. Just here. Don't get distracted. And that's the problem, is we do tend to get distracted. We have all these different things going on, but just here. Because if you just hear the holy name, between the tongue and the ear, Krishna is dancing. There's nothing between the tongue and the ear, and Krishna is dancing on your tongue. Okay? Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samavekta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.